What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another video. Today, I'm going to give you the best draft strategy for beginners, intermediate, and even expert fantasy players to bring your fantasy hockey skills to the next level. But before we jump in this video, make sure you like this video, subscribe if you're not already, and click that link tree in the link below to gain access to all of our content channels. I'm pumped for this video, and I won't make you wait any longer. Let's jump in. The first strategy is the position scarcity strategy. Typically, leagues will have more forwards than defensemen, meaning that defenseman pool will likely be much more scarce. In leagues where blocks and hits are not present, you'll be heavily reliant on the big point producing defensemen. Fantasy owners who fail to draft a defenseman in the early to mid parts of the draft will find themselves scrambling near the end and will end up with a stacked forward group, but a bunch of punt defensemen. The forward pool, especially for sleepers, is usually relatively large in size, and that means you can simply prioritize your decor early and focus on those late round gems you have stashed away in your queue. Similarly, for forwards, you may run into a problem finding centers if you don't have a top 7 pick. The best 4 players in the league this year, McDavid, Leon, Matthews, and McKinnon, are all centermen and provide massive production. If you end up with a pick outside of the top 7, you will likely have to settle for a winger like Rantanen, Kaprizov, Ovechkin, meaning that you'll have to find your center one a little bit later. In the early parts of the mock drafts this season, I found it a bit difficult to find that perfect center one. I had 10th overall pick in my first mock draft. I went Ovechkin, and then the second round I drafted Hedman. And then when my third pick came back around, the early centers outside of the big 4 in Aho and Zibanejad were already off the board. So ensure you prepare yourself for this, even if you have a later round pick in the first round, by loading up your queue with high upside centers like Jack Hughes at ADP 93, Sam Bennett at ADP 110, and even Vincent Trocheck at ADP 253. The next part of this strategy video is to focus on players who are on the top power play. Can you not decide between 2 players? Do one of these 2 players play on the top power play unit and the other does not? Emphasize drafting those power play 1 players. Not only will they contribute to your overall special team points, but the upside to score points and take high quality shots dramatically increases compared to those who are not in the top power play unit. There are a number of good value players who produced a significant amount in the power play last season. Toivu Teravainen ended the season with 31 power play points, 14th best in the season, and is currently at ADP 84. Sam Reinhart also had 31 power play points and is currently being drafted at ADP 66. What about a defenseman? Noah Dobson, who finished 9th in the league for defenseman power play points at ADP 95, or defenseman 17 off the board. To find a breakout player, sometimes you just need to look at a team's top power play unit. And this is the case with the players I just mentioned. You want to be looking at players on the top power play unit, but the next strategy is you want to try and avoid those players that are on non-contending teams. Many leagues now feature plus minus, honestly a stat I really don't like for fantasy, but most leagues incorporate it. Non-contending teams more often than not will find themselves trailing in games, and that means that the team just isn't producing offense or has poor goaltending and defense. Instead, focus on players who will be on contending teams or teams with high-firing offenses. No one really saw the breakout last season in Valeri Nichushkin, but this was attributed to him finding top 6 minutes on a team that finished 4th in goals for and had the 4th best goals for and against differential. What about on the flip side? Jacob Chychrun was an extremely hyped up player last season for almost no reason. Yeah, he was good in 2020, but the Coyotes sold off their entire roster, leaving Chychrun and Keller and the rest of the team filled with depth forwards or prospects. He struggled because he had no team in front of him. Some of the worst defensive teams last year were the Canadiens, the Coyotes, and the Red Wings. I feel like more recently, I guess since McDavid was drafted or Matthew was drafted into the league, there's been a lot of hype around the young guns. For me, I recommend not reaching on young guns. There's just so much hype sizzling on social media around some of the league's top prospects, but more times than not, they don't have a glamorous season you drafted them for. Look at Alexis Lafreniere. First overall in 2020, he was extremely good in the World Juniors. In his first season, I saw him drafted as early as round 5, and he was a drop in just a few weeks. 21 points in 56 games as a rookie. The same outcome for those who drafted Jack Hughes. Year 1, he had just 21 points in 61 games and was a minus 26. Year 2, 31 points in 56 games and a minus 3. Rookies always have tremendous upside, and their draft stock already has that priced in. Fantasy owners are always looking for the next Moritz Seider or Lucas Raymond, league-winning picks, but just be careful. Mason McTavish and Matty Beniers will be drafted probably within the top 100 this season, which personally I think is just way too risky for me. They haven't proven anything yet, and both are actually on pretty bad teams. Why not take Sam Bennett on ADP 110, who's a top 6 forward, and he's on an elite team? keep this video short and concise, I'm going to give you one more strategy that I recommend for all fantasy players. Mock draft, mock draft, mock draft. The final strategy here is, and I can't emphasize it anymore, is to do mock drafts before your real draft. There's just so many benefits that can give you an edge over your opponents. First, you can begin to set up your queue. How many times have you forgotten about a player that you liked because you forgot to add them to your queue? When mock drafting, get in the habit of setting up your queue right away, even make a list of players. Another benefit is that you start to learn where players are being drafted and you might be able to take at each pick. Did the same top 6 players get drafted in each mock draft you did? Who did you grab round 1 but missed out on round 2? So many of these questions are answered for you. Finally, you can easily identify which position lacks in each of your drafts and adjust to your own personal strategy. Maybe you find yourself taking way too many forwards and by round 7 there are barely any good defensemen left. Maybe you waited too long on a goaltender and you ended up with 2 fringe starters. Mock drafts take less than 30 minutes to complete, and for those who actually take fantasy seriously or are just in large prize pool leagues, you should complete at least 2 or 3 mock drafts prior to your real draft. That'll do it for our 5 game-changing fantasy draft tips video. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next one.